Dhamma greetings. This is Aya Dhammadinna. I'm a Buddhist nun and Candana Bhikkhu's one of his students. As you're about to watch a Dhamma talk by Pante, please note that he's a wandering homeless monk and he doesn't have regular support from a Buddhist community. So he lives thanks to your donations. So if you are benefiting from Pante's work, please consider making a donation via the link that is provided. Thank you.
Similes, metaphors, analogies, and stories are some of the tools that Lord Buddha would use quite often. And today's sutta is one such discourse where Lord Buddha uses a simile. This is a sutta that I have not covered before anywhere. So I was recently exploring the Samyutta Nikāya, which is something that I enjoy doing because they're a series of shorter discourses, but nevertheless, sometimes they could be quite long actually, but they, like all the other suttas, I know I try to sometimes say this sutta, that sutta, but they're all so delicious for the heart. They're so powerful. And Lord Buddha had a saying for a term that he would use, a definition, simplification as to why similes, not just him, but inspired by him, mimicking their own teacher, as it were, the disciples of Lord Buddha's, the Arya Savakas, the noble Arahants, would use that phrase as well. And also they would use similes. And the saying or the phrase goes something like this. It says, for some intelligent beings can really understand the meaning of what is being said and taught through the tool, through the instrument, through the method of similes, stories. And when we think of human culture, we didn't have writings all throughout human history, but we did have stories, especially when people would gather around a campfire and the elders would tell stories. And that's how wisdom would be passed on from one generation to the next. So we see this so alive and well throughout the suttas, throughout the teachings that we find of Lord Buddha's, captured in these Pali canon, Nikāyas, the collections of discourses. So today's simile is about the hawk. The hawk. Actually, it's not about the hawk, but the hawk plays a part in it. And oftentimes, and this is something that you can also use to identify suttas, sometimes the title of the sutta might be misleading, as it were, in the sense that the earliest compilers, or reciters rather, of the suttas would just use one of the first few words that you see in the beginning of the sutta itself, the sutta in question, for example. So, if it's about wholesome qualities, that would be called the wholesome quality, if it's the first thing being said in the sutta, or mentioned. So we see this interesting image being presented where you have these two characters, actors in a sense, in the story that Lord Buddha is using as a way to help the bhikkhus, the practitioners, to identify what it means to be away from home. And we're going to see what Lord Buddha is referring to. Now, other translators have translated it in different ways, but I just finished it this week this sutta, and it's a marvelous sutta. It's beautiful, but so much is lost in translation, as is the case with many translations of the suttas. Sad to say. However, that doesn't stop us here to explore the fuller meaning of it in the context of a meditation practice, in the context of how Lord Buddha sees that the spiritual life should be practiced. This is not something that I was mentioning earlier. I was mentioning this earlier to a letter that I received. Someone where I was mentioning how it is very tempting to use terms, tempting to even consider yourself. Let's say if you're a person who reads, listens to suttas and knows suttas by heart, maybe. However, it just goes skin deep. It doesn't go deeper than that. When push comes to shove, as it were, life throws its punches at you. What happens to those suttas that you knew by heart? The principles. You might know the 5 spiritual faculties, you might know the 5 spiritual powers, you might know the 7 factors of awakening, you might know the Eightfold Path by heart. And the list goes on and on. But when you are in the middle of an emotional jam, when you're in that moment of conflict, where is the Dhamma for you? That's why sati is extremely important. Because it asks you, excuse me, where are we placing the attention upon? The attention, manasikara. Is it yoniso manasikara, which is wise, reflective attention? Or ayoniso manasikara, unwise attention? Because you might be playing the part for all intents and purposes. You might fool yourself, and along with fooling others, that you're doing all the right things, all the right steps are covered by you. But in your heart of hearts, you know better. You know something is wrong. You're not living the path. So Lord Buddha was addressing a group of practitioners who had fooled themselves. If you remember, I think it was last week where we were talking about the blazing bonfire sutta, where he was scolding and chastising monastics, practitioners, who were not in it for the right reasons. They were just playing the part. So this is about us. It doesn't have to do with being a monastic, like I've always said. It has to do with you, just you. Are you living an authentic life or not? You alone can know that. Your teacher can know that too if they're observing you carefully. What is your behavior? And are you straying, as they say, from the reservation? Have you left the sanctuary of your home? And we're going to see it in the sutta. So without further ado, let's start. So it's from the connected discourses, or the Samyutta Nikāya. So it's SN 47.6. 47.6. It's from the Mahāvagga Samyutta. It has many branchings. It's one of the most complex structures that you could find in all of the other Nikāyas. You won't see this. So, but compilers have done their best, I think, thematically joining suttas, where unlike the other suttas, they don't follow a linear path. So thematically, they've been squeezed together from different time periods, different decades, even. So this one is compiled under the great section, or the Mahāvagga. And then you have the subsection, which is the Satipatthana Samyutta, which deal with there's a group of it, a subgrouping, which is on the establishments of mindfulness, Samyutta Nikāya, and then you have within that a section that is called Ambapali Vagga. Ambapali was the famous courtesan of Vesali, who ended up becoming a student of Lord Buddha's. She also became one of the major supporters of the sasana. And then from that Vagga, we have a series of suttas, out of which we have this simile of the hawk sutta, which is Sakuṇagghi Sutta. Sakuṇagghi Sutta, simile of the hawk. So sutta number SN 47.6. And again, like all the other suttas, we have this. I just uploaded this this week onto the website for the PDF. It's fully there. It's good to have it, and if you can print it, it's good to highlight if you need to, and do your thing with it. And just sometimes it's good to have it in your hand, tactile perception. It really helps drive it at home. So the website is, if you didn't know, mindreleased.com in the Pali Sutta section. Anyhow, all right, so let's begin. Bhikkhus, long ago, in the distant past, a hawk was flying in the sky, when suddenly it went into a dive and grabbed hold of a quail in mid-flight. As it fell prey to the hawk's sharp talons, and that's, hawks are very powerful hunters. They are among the very best predators in the animal kingdom. So it just dove from a higher elevation, grabbed hold of this quail, this bird. Now, when the confused quail, being carried off by the hawk, began coming out of its stupor, he realized what was happening and started lamenting. I have no luck. No good thing ever happens to me. I have no merits whatsoever. So stupid of me to have strayed away from my ancestral home. I should have simply stayed put within the protective area of my sanctuary, instead of wandering off to the domains of others. This is the quail having this loud utterance. Enough so that the hawk is listening, is hearing, as he's carrying him off to his nest so that he can tear him into pieces and eat him. And the quail continues, if I only had resorted to my ancestral home today, instead of leaving its safe and protective boundaries, there would be no way this hawk could have possibly grabbed hold of me. No possibility for this hawk to make me his prey today. If only I was in my ancestral domain, this hawk wouldn't stand a chance against me, nor put me into submission like this. Now imagine you're the hawk. You just challenged you. This quail that you're carrying off to eat, he just said basically, if the rules had been a little bit different, if I were here instead of in a different territory, this would not have happened. Now the hawk, in hearing this, replied, and where might this resort or sanctuary that would give you protection from me might be? What is this ancestral home of yours that you speak of that would make you safe from me? And the quail replied, down there, my home is the newly plowed fields you see, where there are many places for me to hide and take cover among the chunks of removed soil. Then the self-confident hawk, assured of his own strength and agility, certain of his own abilities to swoop down and grab the quail again, intentionally releases the quail from his talons while saying, go ahead, quail, I'm setting you free for now. Go to your home, but you'll soon find out that there is no way of escaping me. So now the quail got what it wanted, at least the first part, because the hunter is on his tail, is coming. Then, because the quail flew straight to the newly plowed field and sat atop a large chunk of removed soil and began shouting at the hawk. Now, hawk, try and catch me if you can. Come and get me now, hawk. I dare you to come and grab me. Then the self-confident hawk, assured of his own strength and agility, certain of his own abilities, quickly collapsed its wings as it went straight down at an incredible speed, about to make his assault on the quail that was now sitting at the bottom. But the quail, carefully observing how the hawk was descending fast, watchfully attentive of the hawk's speedy attack, suddenly jumped inside one of the clumps of removed soil, going underneath it. Duck and cover. It just covered itself. The hawk, however, sweeping down with such force and speed, slammed its body against the clumps of removed soil, the ancestral home of the quail, and thereby shattered his breast right on the spot. It died. Not the quail, the hawk. So it is, bhikkhus, when one strays outside of one's own ancestral home, away from the protection of his own sanctuary and into the domain of others, this is what occurs. Therefore, bhikkhus, do not stray outside into the domains of others. Move back to your ancestral home. Resort back to the protection of your own sanctuary. Otherwise, Māra will truly grab hold of the hearts of all those who stray from their ancestral home, those who resort outside into the domain of others, away from the protection of their own sanctuary, thereby giving Māra the power to grab and bind them into his submission. So you see who the hawk was in this simile. It's Māra, Lord Buddha is saying, who's so confident that he can get you anywhere, anytime. And what is it that is never to be considered a bhikkhu's ancestral home, his own protective domain? For they truly are the domain and territory of others. So Lord Buddha is saying, never veer off, never leave your ancestral home and go into the domain of others. So what is that? It is, Lord Buddha says, the 5 strands of sensual stimulation. And what are these 5? These are visible forms that are caught by the awareness of the eyes, that are enjoyed for causing one pleasure, for being delightfully enticing, which provoke lust to arise in the heart. Sounds that are caught by the awareness of the ears, that are enjoyed for causing one pleasure, for being delightfully enticing, which provoke lust to arise in the heart. Odors that are caught by the awareness of the nose, that are enjoyed for causing one pleasure, for being delightfully enticing, which provoke lust to arise in the heart. Flavors that are caught by the awareness of the tongue, that are enjoyed for causing one pleasure, for being delightfully enticing, which provoke lust to arise in the heart. And touches that are caught by the awareness of the body, that are enjoyed for causing one pleasure, for being delightfully enticing, which provoke lust to arise in the heart. These, therefore, are the 5 strands of sensual stimulation, which are never to be considered a bhikkhu's ancestral home. They should never be one's own refuge. Again, a bhikkhu here is you can think of it as a placeholder for any genuine practitioner of the Dhamma. Okay? Genuine, and that might include you. If you're truly practicing sila, samadhi, panya, that would make you a genuine practitioner of the Dhamma, as far as the Dhamma is concerned, as far as Lord Buddha is concerned. Okay, so don't be fooled by titles again. Don't think, oh, this is only for bhikkhu, so I shouldn't worry. No, then it means you have fallen prey to whom? To the hawk. The hawk grabbed you by its talons, Māra. So, but the 5 strands of sensual stimulation, remember, it doesn't say 5 senses. Sensual stimulation, the 5 strands or branches or cords. Of course, when you're alive, as a living, breathing human being, conscious human being, you have access to these 5. In addition to the mind, by the way. That would make it the 6th organ. However, the issue is not having those sense perceptions. It has to do with the lusting after them, if you notice. That's what Lord Buddha keeps on saying. Being enticed by them. Let's say you're walking by a place and then you get a whiff of something so fragrant. You see something so beautiful, so delightful. What happens? Is sati there or not? Because if you have been taken by that flavor, let's say if you're eating something delicious that you haven't eaten for a long time, or some people have told you about it or talked about, and now you're finally tasting it, are you losing yourself into that stimulation of the senses or not? And that means that's everything to do with whether you are caught outside your ancestral home or you are in it, well found within it. You're secure in the safety of your home. So now Lord Buddha is going to address the other part. So he mentioned as to what are the domains of others. The domains of others is what belongs to this body. You're more than the body. We're here to use the body. So Lord Buddha is basically saying, use the body's senses to overcome those baser instincts, which have everything to do with ayoniso manasikara, with mindlessness. Every time you experience something, are you skipping the scene, as it were? Are you leaving town, as it were? Meaning, is your mindfulness gone? When you see something, when you taste something, when you hear something? Or is mindfulness still there, quietly present, but very present? Oh, I love this song. I love this piece of music. Oh, yes, yes. Are you lost in memory land? Are you lost in the papancha land because of being triggered by the sound? If you are, the hawk is nicely carrying you to its nest, holding you with its talons, powerful talons, because you're gone. So bring yourself back from just being lost in that state of delight. That doesn't mean you cannot enjoy. Lord Buddha doesn't say you don't enjoy. Be present as you're enjoying it in a sense. But even that, some people might misunderstand. Lord Buddha did not deny life, okay? He never did. But you have senses, you're going to taste. When you taste something spicy, let's say somebody offered the bhikkhu food, there's some things that are spicy, there's some that are sweet, there's some that are sour, there are some that are salty, etc. The bhikkhu or the person tasting it will taste these different flavors, but he's not going to be fighting with what is happening. He's aware. You're aware. When you accidentally scratch your body against something or you hit your foot somewhere, and what happened? Well, there was a touch with the body. Being lost in it means you've been stimulated enough that you've forgotten, you've relinquished sati. That's another way. So it's not just being delighted. Delighted means, in this sense, being enticed means, in this sense, that you're not there anymore. You're in the fullness of the experience, minus sati, minus the Dhamma. But you can experience the stubbing of the toe and watch what's happening. You immediately feel if you're present, you will feel the sensations coming up, depending on the sati and how sharp it has become. Sometimes you will be able to track it, even though it's very fast, the signals that are going to the brain. You might feel the goose flesh behind your neck, even parts of the brain lighting up. And then you will even see the perceptions before it turns into heavy-duty, powerful feeling of disgust and hatred towards, or anger towards, why is this table there? Why did this happen? So if sati is there, you will be able to catch snippets of this, and then you'll be able to go deeper and probe it. You did not become enticed. You did not get lost in that experience of tactile perception. You saw the contact. In fact, you are seeing the contacts, because it's not just one contact. Because before perception turns into feeling, there's a contact that's necessary. Before the feeling turns into good, bad, or the ugly, it's still feeling. There needs to be a decision made by you intentionally on some level, fine minutia of a level, where you go, yeah, every time this happens, I feel lousy and I hate this. Oh, okay, so it goes into the category of bad feeling, painful feeling. I hate this. Okay, let's label this feeling. We hate this. Done. This is happening exceedingly fast. But you will never see any of this happen if you are lost and you're holding your foot and you're crying out loud because you've been completely enticed by the sense stimulation of the body. So this is the opposite aspect of pleasurable and painful sense stimulation. So let's go back to the sutta. So bhikkhus, move back to your ancestral home. Resort back to your own protective domain. For truly, Māra will never be able to grab hold of the hearts of all those who move back to their ancestral territory, those who resort back to the protection of their own sanctuary. Māra will simply be powerless to grab hold of them again. And what is a bhikkhu's ancestral home? How does he resort to the protection of his own sanctuary? This is Lord Buddha about to clarify. All this is to be found within the four bases of mindfulness. Satipatthana, sometimes called the Four Foundations, sometimes called the Four Establishments, but basically, they're the four bases of mindfulness. You can anchor yourself onto any of these four. Sometimes the experience is so intense, you need to grab hold of something to anchor sati on, okay? And that's why we practice meditation, to get more and more refined and faster and quicker at detecting all these fluctuations. You'll be able to see the sensory stimulation before it becomes so loud. And you can just drop into, let's say, the feeling. You can detect, and you can anchor yourself on the feeling, Vedananupassana. You can start observing, feeling, and that becomes your meditation object in a sense. However, if you're not that developed, the body will be the one that you go for, because it's much more loud, it's much more present, it's much more, it has more definition, it's more tangible. It's more reachable for a mind like that has not yet developed deep enough to detect the fluctuations or the variations of feelings and lock on to one of those and says, what's happening? Hmm. Hmm. So, and obviously, if the meditation has developed for the person, the mind has learned how to become cultivated and become calmer and more tranquil, it will be able to detect the fluctuations that are occurring in the chitta, in the heart. What was that? What's happening? I mean, I was so joyful 5 minutes ago. What's happening now? I feel the heart. What is this? Sometimes it's translated as mental states by some, but chitta is a term that Lord Buddha would use very organically. And the closest word that we can come up with to describe that is the intuitive awareness, the intuition, which is what we're talking about is the heart. And it's not just the heart as in the biological, physical organ. The heart that allows us to feel metta, for example. The heart that holds the Dhamma, protects the Dhamma. So you're becoming more and more cognizant, aware. So anyhow, I know I'm jumping forward, but basically, Lord Buddha here states, all this is to be found, the domain that is, the sanctuary of the practitioner is the Satipatthana. And what are these four? Here, bhikkhus, the bhikkhu dedicates himself to meditating while being fully attentive and aware of the body, carefully staying with the body by observing whatever he detects to be the most pronounced bodily sensation that is occurring at that time. This is key because you might see so many different translations of this formula that Lord Buddha uses. The Pali is so full of meaning, but in such a short sentence, it says so much. Unfortunately, many translators have tried to mimic that formulation, the shortness of it, as it were. But so much is lost. And sometimes, unfortunately, people use terminologies that are so academic or so antiquated, so old. It's lifeless for us. But for me, I look at it whenever I'm translating as to Lord Buddha said these words, every single word has a purpose as it leaves Lord Buddha's lips. Purpose for the Dhamma in the heart of the practitioner to be ignited. So there's a meaning when he's saying, aware of the body, carefully staying with the body by observing whatever he detects to be the most pronounced bodily sensation. The most. Now, it could be that it's the breath. Fine. Lock onto the breath, because sometimes it's not going to, you're so out of it. The experience of, let's say, anger is so much that it's very difficult for you to use sati to find the breath in that heated moment. But you can feel your fists tightening up as you're about to punch this person in front of you. The breath might have been lost to you, but the fists, or sometimes I've noticed people say, my hands feel hot. When I ask them, what do you feel? In those moments of anger or anxiety, let's say, what happens? They say, I feel like there's like two people trying to press against both temples at the same time in my head. Or I can't speak, as if somebody's trying to choke me. Or my chest, it feels like there's a ton of heavy lead weight pressing down on my chest, as if there's an elephant pressing down. So that means the person can use that most pronounced experiencing of the body as the anchor for Kāyanupassana, which is this first aspect of, or the first base of the Satipatthana, of mindfulness. So Lord Buddha continues, he does this while he trains ardently, but without having any thoughts or attitudes of either longing or resentment towards the world. This distinguishes the Dhamma from anything else out there. The dualism that you see in other religions, you don't find it in the practice. Because if there is, then you're back to square one, as they say. Nothing's happened. You just went from one extreme to the next. Now there's an us versus a them. There's no growth, ultimately. So you're still within the confines of conditionality, impermanence. And Dhamma is all about transcending impermanence, transcending conditionality. So it's crucial for you to understand here the longing and resentment towards the world is relinquished as well. Meaning you're neutrally observing whatever is most pronounced in the body. Okay? Neutrally. And that's why, meaning you're not loving it, you're not hating it. Ah, yes, that time when it was, how come the neighbors are so loud? I'm trying to practice satipatthana. What is that? I'm hateful towards something versus holding on to something here that I want to caress and hold. No, I missed it. So Lord Buddha even is putting that caveat. Be careful, he's saying. As long as you're doing this, but without having any thoughts or attitudes of either longing or resentment towards the world. That's why many people, when they go on retreats, meditation retreats, they miss the whole point. That's why there's this shock when they leave the retreat and come back to society, to the real world. The ugliness shows up. That's where you see there's not been any personality change. Even if you've been sitting for 30 hours straight without movement, thinking that you're in the 8th jhana or something. Nope. Because you didn't even practice proper satipatthana. Satipatthana is the key that distinguishes Lord Buddha's teachings from anything else, including the jhanas. The jhanas only work if they are based on the satipatthana. Okay? Mindfulness. And that's why the jhanas themselves will never bring you wisdom. They never will take you to nibbana unless you have the incorporation of satipatthana. And sati itself is the path to gaining wisdom. Satipatthana is why the Dhamma is the Dhamma. It's the direct path. Now we get to the Vedananupassana, which is the second base. Also because the bhikkhu dedicates himself to meditating while being fully attentive and aware of feelings, carefully staying with whatever he detects to be the most pronounced feeling occurring at that time. Mindful of it in all its transitions and ever-changing states. Sometimes many people think that feelings are either good, meaning pleasurable, or bad, meaning painful, and that's it. That's not it, only because they miss the biggest chunk of feelings. The biggest percentage of feelings, as it were, is the neutral feeling, that state of blah. You feel, when someone comes and asks you, how do you feel? Like, I don't know, it's just blah. So-so. What is so-so? So is one extreme, the other so is another extreme, and everything in between is neutral feeling. That, if you bring satipatthana, the sati, just the mindfulness there, and then you see how there in the middle of it is what? Tanha. Craving, because you want action. You want action. You're thirsty for something to happen. That's why the meditation becomes boring after the first 10, 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours. Nothing's happening. What do you mean nothing's happening? Well, there's nothing happening. What do you mean? Like, what is a thing to be happening for you? Well, it needs to have some flesh to it. It needs to have some juiciness to it, some joy, some pain, something. Nothing's happening. You're describing neutral feeling. which is the majority of feelings that we have. We're just not aware of them because the stage is always set for those other two actors, pain and pleasure. And that's what we're doing. We're constantly running from one to the other because we want to latch on to the pleasurable. Life will come and say, no, here's some painful conditions. It's just, it's not like somebody's there doing it to us. There's no such thing, but just a set of conditions happening. So if you latch on to something, that means you have expectations that it will stay like this. Well, that itself is bringing you the conditions for it to change quicker and becomes even more of a nasty experience for you because it's going to tear you apart from that thing you love and attach to, upadana, grabbing, clinging. But we're missing the main feeling, meanwhile, which is the neutral feeling. That is where wisdom occurs. That. Lord Buddha continues, he says, he does this while he trains ardently, but without having any thoughts or attitudes of either longing or resentment towards the world. So here you see a glimpse of that. So that last few lines, those last few lines are repeated with every single one of these bases or foundations of Satipatthana. So now we get into the third base, which is the Cittanupassana. Also, bhikkhus, the bhikkhu dedicates himself to meditating while being fully attentive and aware of whatever state that is occurring in the heart, citta, carefully staying with whatever he detects to be the most pronounced experience taking place within the citta at that time, remaining mindful of it in all its transitions and ever-changing states. He does this as he trains ardently, but without having any thoughts or attitudes of either longing or resentment towards the world. Sometimes you feel so many insights coming one after the other. And then that same afternoon, maybe a few hours after, it feels dead, hollow in the citta. Nothing's happening. It's like dead space or dead air. What is that? So someone who is not practicing or hasn't reached this level of practicing the Satipatthana, and these are, they build on top of each other. That's why I've had people who have come to me over the years, oh, can I practice the Dhammanupassana or the Cittanupassana? I would say, well, how is your practice of the Kāyanupassana? Like when you're putting on your clothes, when you're brushing your teeth, or when you're washing your face and you reach for the towel. As you're reaching for the towel, are you aware of your fingertips touching the towel? Can you tell the difference in texture? How about when your hand and your arm is actually stretching away from your body? Are you feeling the space that now is, showing up as you are stretching, from it being flexed to a stretch? Can you tell the difference? Can you feel the space happening in your armpit because you're reaching out now? So if the person, these are just examples, or when you're stepping into a room or out from another room, one of the easiest exercises you could do to bring awareness into your everyday life more and more is to see as to which foot do you use to enter or exit a room with. Is it the left foot or the right foot? Or when you're brushing your teeth, which hand do you use to hold on to the brush, the toothbrush? And how do you hold it? Are you holding it like, almost like a fist? Are you holding it with the tip of your, index and middle finger and then held up with your thumb somewhere? All these are wonderful techniques that you can use to bring sati. As you're doing this more and more and more and more, you develop the capacity to cultivate your mind to such a point where you are seeing and observing feelings, which is the next step, which is Vedananupassana. And then you're identifying, oh, this feeling actually is a painful feeling, although I didn't identify it first. How do I identify it now? Because the mind is calm enough for me to detect a difference between longing for something. Oh yes, that ice cream over there is better than that one. What was that? No judgment, you're just observing. You're just observing, like I was saying when we were doing the meditation. And then you get to the Chittanupassana. Now it's much more refined. So many people walk around saying things about themselves or how they feel or how they think about things and relationships, and they have no clue what they're saying. People call each other names. People identify or claim to be experiencing certain things that have nothing to do with reality. It could be declaring your love for someone when there's absolutely no love. In fact, it's just something you had to say you felt like. So many conditions are there that you're not willing to look at. But a person who practices Chittanupassana identifies if there is resentment, hatred, contempt, joy even, or jealousy when you see someone else happy and having achieved something that you wanted or didn't want it to happen to them. And you might be smiling and you're saying, yeah, you're cheering them on, and you're like, yeah. But someone who has the level of sati necessary to penetrate into the chitta, the heart, they will see, wait a minute, let me separate myself from this environment and just sit. Oh, that is actually jealousy I'm feeling inside. See, this is not just a feeling. There's many emotions that Lord Buddha talked about, but there's three feelings that he primarily delineated: pleasurable, painful, and neutral. But he talked about many emotions. The playground of all these is the heart. You can think of it. Okay, the chitta. That's another way of looking at this. But please be aware that the Dhamma develops in your heart. Your practice will develop thanks to the relationship you have with your intuitive awareness, your intuition. In the language of modern physiology or anatomy or neurobiology or neuropsychiatry or neuro something, you can think of this also having to do with the right brain and the left brain working together in unison without fighting. Where you're allowing trust. You've heard me say this before about the value of trust in the practice. Your level of understanding Dhamma has everything to do with your level of trust. Wise trust, by the way, not gullibility. Huge difference there. Not agreeing with what others are saying simply to let the day go by smoother. Let them get off your back. Sure, yeah, honey, yes, I agree, yeah. Meanwhile, you don't. Having the ability to say no when your heart says no. But what is it that you're basing it on? That is trust, based on experiences, understanding. In other words, the combination of all these factors will turn into wisdom. That's why we need the suttas. You need to have a blueprint as to what wisdom is referring to. Where can we find it? Are there examples of it? That's why we go to the discourses, to the suttas, to help us identify these things. Otherwise, it can easily be an ego trip, some Bhante's ego trip. Who knows? That's why whenever I share these talks with you, please always do your due diligence and go back to the suttas to kind of to see it for yourself, to see whether it agrees with the suttas found with the Lord Buddha's teachings. This is each one's responsibility. Then it becomes a wonderful experience, personal experience of yours, because this path, this Dhamma, is to be experienced by the wise for themselves, by themselves, each of us. So there's personal responsibility. And finally, also bhikkhus, the bhikkhu dedicates himself to meditating while being fully attentive and aware of whatever mental phenomena or states, Dhamma. Dhamma here is not the teaching of Lord Buddha. Dhamma with a capital D in English, we write. Dhamma, it's a term that was around long before Lord Buddha showed up, obviously, on the scene. Dhammas are, you can think of them also as mental objects. They could be phenomena. They could be principles. So it's a wide-ranging term. But to simplify it, again, with the context, in English, we just, or in Western languages, we use the capital D to distinguish it from just a plain old mental object. So while being fully attentive and aware of whatever mental phenomena or states, Dhamma, along with their relationships that are occurring at that time, carefully staying with whatever he detects to be the most pronounced mental phenomena he is experiencing, mindful of it in all its transitions and ever-changing states. He does this as he trains ardently, but without having any thoughts or attitudes of either longing or resentment towards the world. The Dhammanupassana, this is the last portion of the Satipatthana. As I said, it's the most refined level of Satipatthana, the practicing sati. Includes, obviously, the 5 hindrances, the pancha nivarana. These are the obstacles that we have. So it's not, these are, you cannot touch them. So you cannot, they're not even as tangible as feelings, because you can easily be swayed by them. You can even easily be convinced that this is happening because of, I don't know, something out there. Meanwhile, it's simply doubt. Just doubt. You're doubting the teaching. You're doubting yourself. You're doubting the Dhamma. You're doubting Lord Buddha. You're saying, yeah, this works for everybody else except for me. What is that? So a person who's practicing Dhammanupassana, the mind has been training itself so well that it identifies. He says, okay, where is the Dhamma in that? Is this wholesome? What I'm saying, is this even true? And how is this helping me now? Saying that everybody is correct, everybody is, benefiting from the Dhamma except for me. What are the odds of that ever happening? You mean to say the whole universe is conspiring against you so you don't succeed? Really? Man, you see the foolishness of it. A person who practices Dhammanupassana is able to see this. And they also could see the lust. Why do I want to break the sila? Why am I feeling this way? Why is there remorse? Oh, why is there fighting? Oh, because I thought of breaking the sila, or maybe I did. And aside from the 5 hindrances, you also have, there's several. There's also the 7 factors of awakening. So that's a wholesome series of dhammas as such, principles. The unwholesome were the hindrances. You also have the 5 aggregates: the body, feelings, perception. habitual tendencies or drives, sankharas, and then you have the vijnana. So you observe those. So the mind has become so refined in its adaptability, but also in its sensitivity to detect what is the most pronounced experience. What could be brought into the crosshairs of sati, basically. So for such a person who's practicing satipatthana on this level, just practicing the breath, for example, would be too crude, too rough, too heavy. Their mind is much more stable. Their samadhi is much more deeper and going deeper and deeper and deeper. So they feel like they need to relinquish the heavier aspects of satipatthana. So they start to, out of curiosity, going deeper into the mind, into the heart. This is where you identify avidya, in the heart. And so long as avidya or ignorance is in the heart, the Dhamma cannot fully blossom to perfection, which is the state of arahantship. You will be always a victim of ignorance unless your mind has developed in its mindfulness practice and sampajanya, which is full awareness, where you are, how you're doing, what's happening. You're fully present. But the mind is going deeper. It's like a person is going deeper and deeper into the ocean. You need to adjust we call it equalization. Equalizing to get the air out, bubbles, so you can go deeper without blowing up your ears. So that's a metaphor. But you also need to relinquish things like air and things that hold on to air. And similarly, the person will be able to identify the Four Noble Truths. You will see, that's suffering. Every time I have doubt, what's the leftover? What's the aftertaste of that? It's painful, it's bitter, it's like, I feel like nothing. The doubt, when it's there, over dominating the heart. So how could I describe that? Is that a good feeling or bad? It's bad, very bad. Okay. So how could you describe it? Is it dukkha? Oh, yes, it is dukkha. So the person now, without much argument, without much going back and forth, they see dukkha whenever it occurs. And then, especially, they see as to why dukkha keeps on happening, reoccurring. They see how they're holding on to this. Let's say, again, we're using the example of doubt. I'm holding on to this self-image that I'm never good enough. I'm like a broken piece of something. I'm not like you over there who's perfect, or you all over there. You guys are perfect. I'm just messed up. Right from the factory. In fact, I came out like this, and I'm going to go like. Is there something wrong with this picture? Generalizing much? Absolutely. The person is holding on to this idea. Generalizing that life is that for them. That's how it has always been. That's not true. No one has had such a life. No one can have. The odds are against such a possibility. But if the person is still suffering, it means one thing: there is strong upadana. There's strong grabbing of an idea, a commitment to a position, because that's what the brain has been accustomed to, familiarized with. In psychology, it's called negative bias. The person will willingly, voluntarily choose not to look at the positive aspects of their life. I'm not talking about like positive affirmations. No, real good things that are happening to them. They won't see it. They won't see the blue sky whenever there's no chemtrails, that is. They won't taste the good, refreshing, cool water when it's really hot, and they reach for it, they open the fridge door, they're drinking this cool water. It's like, wow. They don't do that. They're still lost in their thoughts of how to perpetuate this position of suffering stemming from the doubt in this example. And when the person realizes this, then suddenly there is relinquishing of that. And that is the third noble truth. The cessation of suffering takes place, the ending of suffering, third noble truth. And then the person says, I like this. I really like this because I feel the burden just came off of my shoulder. I can breathe, Bhante. Oh, their facial muscles relax. I used to see this often, if not always, in therapy sessions. As a therapist, when I would see the tone of the voice of the person would change, and they start crying. Men, women, young, old, didn't make a difference. They would start crying. What happened? They saw through their deception. And they saw, even more importantly, that there was an ending, even for a brief millisecond. They saw the ending of suffering, which again indicates the brilliance of Lord Buddha to discover and explain so beautifully and formulate it within the Four Noble Truths. So for this, you have the Fourth Noble Truth, which is the delineation, the clarification, codification of the Eightfold Path. So the person now sees that their view has everything to do with them either experiencing pain, more suffering, more dukkha, or not, the absence of dukkha. So my view dictates my well-being. So this is when the person is now maybe first time in their life, is really experiencing power. They're really experiencing what it feels like to have decision-making power, accountability, responsibility. And they run the show. It's such a liberating feeling to see that one's own view or views can either bring in torment, torture, suffering, or liberation. So right view, and then we have right thought or right intentionality. You need to put it into action, the view. It can't just stay a view. And once you have the intention, the right intention there, then it shows up in right speech. It could be vocalized speech or subvocal speech, what you say to yourself constantly, what reverberates between your ears. And then that manifests in the form of action, which turns into right action, samma kammanta. And then you have right livelihood. It definitely shows up in the type of work you're doing, and whether it has or does not have Dhamma. And then comes the right effort, samma vayama, because it all has to be always infused with the right effort, with the right energy to identify what I should and should not do in order for me to have all these things become fruitful. And at that point, the person is practicing right mindfulness, samma sati. And if you have samma sati, it is only a matter of time before you drop into the fullness of samma samadhi, which is the eighth of the Noble Eightfold Path. And there you have the entire formula. So the person can also use this as a part of Dhammanupassana, as a Dhamma, lowercase d. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is what Lord Buddha completes the sutta. The Satipatthana is a bhikkhu's ancestral home where he resorts to gain the protection of his own sanctuary. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So a wonderful sutta, as you can see, and now you probably, if you remember, it comes from the subsection that's called Satipatthana Samyutta. Now you see why. Because a big chunk of the sutta is dedicated to the mention, the instruction, the teaching of the Satipatthana to the listeners. And that's why they've put it, that's why it's called the connected discourses, the Samyutta Nikāya. So they're put together, linked up in these baskets to help give us a different glance and a different way of approaching the practice. So these are auxiliary, these are supportive, these are incredibly helpful tools that we need to use in our practice. Instead of saying, no, I got this, I don't have to read the suttas, or I just have one sutta and that's what I'm going to stick to. No. Why do that? Because you have inherited, we have inherited the Dhamma. It's not for the elites. It's not for a specific group of people. No. This is for every one of us. Whoever has the eyes to see, whoever has the curiosity to look, and the desire to walk away from that older version of you, of yourself that you held so dear, the source of your suffering, to walk away from that. So it is also then for the courageous among us. So we have inherited this. So what we do with it, obviously, it's each of our choice, basically. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions that I can try to answer. I highly recommend you go back and read them, the suttas, and then you probably also will see so many themes that are so, they might come from different suttas, but you see how Lord Buddha is talking and explaining the same thing over and over and over again in different ways, using so many analogies and similes in this case. Are there any questions? Well, if not, let's transfer some merit. Akasatha Chabhumata Devanaga Mahindika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakhantu Lokasasanam. Akasatha Chabhumata Devanaga Mahindika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakhantu Desanam. Akasatha Chabhumata Devanaga Mahindika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakhantu Mam Paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well. May your practice continue to grow. May your self-confidence in the Dhamma grow. And stop holding on to things, old versions of you. Always be available to turn the page. And that's what you're doing, whether you know it or not, every time you breathe. Every time you exhale, you've basically died. Every time you're inhaling a new breath in, there's an opportunity for your growth. There's an opportunity to start a new page. There's life is giving you itself. And it's an opportunity for you to not hold on to smaller perception of yourself or the judgmental part of you. Open. The eagle, if it doesn't spread its wings, it cannot fly nor glide. Just an image. It won't leave its nest. Forget about it. It won't happen. So Be well. And until next time, next week, which I have a feeling it will be Maranasati Sutta, which is a wonderful sutta on the death, mindfulness of death. So I'll see you next week. Sukhi Hot.